So now to our friendly Saturn.
Yes, in Purva Bhadrapada. So they do have a strange resonance here, which is actually creating conflict in us. And the resonance is dissatisfaction, because when we take the key symbolism of what Saturn means is negativity. What does that mean? Literally the minus sign. It's deducing, Saturn's naysaying. Saturn represents limitations and restrictions. So all of these things essentially create a sense of dissatisfaction in us. Like, we don't like to be limited as human beings. We don't like to have boundaries placed on us. We don't like it when people say no to us. It's either the world is expressing its dissatisfaction to us, or we're expressing our dissatisfaction to the world when we embody that Saturnine voice and ways of being. So, and as I was mentioning in the last part about Purva Bhadrapada, it inherently has this mode or modality of creating dissatisfaction. So when you put Saturn in this nakshatra, it's going to start creating situations of feeling insecure about where you are. Things are not enough, because Saturn represents those lacks and gaps and insecurities, that which is not. So a person can actually, before its retrograde motion, let's say, start to look at their life and say, I'm not who I want to be. I don't have what I want to have. The person starts problematizing things. So what does the mind do once when it starts to problematize what it's not, what it doesn't have, why it's dissatisfied? This brain between our skull is constantly trying to find solution. So the solution is, I need to get this, I need to become that, I need to go there, I need to do that. So it's generating desires as a form of solution to overcome this dissatisfaction, because Saturn just intensified the dissatisfaction when it moved into this nakshatra. So we can start to see that they have a resonance in this way, but the resonance is intensifying the process in Purva Bhadrapada, which will eventually, by the time hopefully Saturn's leaving Purva Bhadrapada, we will understand that the satisfaction that we were seeking, that sense of fullness that we were seeking, was never in the things that we thought we had to go out in the world to chase and get. We're trying to understand the meaning and the purpose of something here, and those things will not give us what we're seeking. And when Saturn starts to start its retrograde motion, which it already has, a lot of people see retrograde motion as redo. Perhaps we can connect that connotation to Mercury, and perhaps we can connect that connotation to Punarvasu Nakshatra. But Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada, it's not so much about redo per se, it's about intensification, because retrograde by itself just means the planet is very close to our own planet. So its significations are being intensely felt. So everything that Saturn symbolizes, we will feel it more intensely.
Yeah, no, I've always known it's basically closer to us, but I
Yeah.
guess yeah, I've definitely heard the redo, but I've also heard it's almost like all those things you didn't finish or you need to get done by when it goes retrograde, it's basically okay, now's your next few months to work through whatever's been left. So any kind of procrastination, like now Saturn's gone retrograde and Saturn's going to make you get through that. Or I don't know if that's correct, but
Yeah, it can induce those kinds of feelings. Okay, so for example, what Saturn's going to do in this nakshatra, especially since it's going to dip back into Dhanishta, there is a backward looking gaze that can come out of this retrograde, which is someone's going to look at their current state of being in life and then reflect on the good old times, the glorious times that when I was younger, when I had this, when I could have done that, when I had that dream, and then life happened and then I couldn't do it. And essentially, if we pay attention to this regression, It's creating a feeling of, it's the dissatisfaction of the present moment that's trying to generate some sort of a desire of how we can orient ourselves in the world to get something in relation to some past thing that was either real or a fantasy about ourselves. So Saturn retrograding here, it can start to create that sense of reflecting back on back in the day when I was that person, when I had that, when I wanted it, when I had the ambition, when I had the drive. It's trying to recreate that. And by the time we get to Dhanishta, it's those things are being recreated. So the chase is on. So once when the Saturn stations and starts to go direct again, we're chasing different aspects of the world because we just regress to a bunch of things in the past. And Saturn also represents time and past and tradition. So all of these significations of Saturn are playing themselves out in this nakshatra. But by the time we get out of the retrograde, the shadow degrees are completed and it's in Uttar Bhadrapada, we'll see that so many of that chasing is still not, they didn't satisfy our need, which was created around this time.
Okay, so basically, is that why? Is that kind of like a trigger by bringing you back and all the good times and all that? It's kind
That's
of
a part
setting
of
that.
it. That's a part of how a person could be set into motion of intensified dissatisfaction, where they have to find some sort of a solution, which is to desire some aspect of the world. And the reference point, because it is retrograding, it could be the reference point could be something in the past that was unfulfilled. Because this nakshatra has a lot to do with things of the world that were never meant to fulfill us anyway. But if the person didn't learn that lesson before, they might reflect back and they're like, if I had only gotten that, then I'd be so happy today. I should go and chase for myself or that thing out in the world again. This is where it's going to evoke it. But
So is it gets invoked when it goes retrograde, but then when it moves forward, it's like you just do it?
you will try to get those things, right? Because this nakshatra needs to gather and collect. It needs to.
No, I guess what I was saying, you always hear that typical like Saturn delays but never denies, or
Mhm.
so when Saturn is sitting in whatever placement, in this case it's here, but so wouldn't it delay everything? Like your goal is in this nakshatra is to get, right?
Saturn's trying to teach something way higher than that. It's going to show its harshness in a in the most saturnine cruel way, in a sense of, because of the dissatisfaction that is creating internally, and the way that our human mind works, that if I'm dissatisfied with something, I need to go get something in order to get rid of dissatisfaction. If we don't have our mental compartments right, and we think that thing is out in the world and we go and chase it, by the end, Saturn's going to show us that you put in all these resources, all of your life force, all of your energy into getting this thing. I'm even going to give it to you. It's going to be in the palm of your hand, and you are more dissatisfied than when you started because you had to put in all this stuff and it still has no meaning. Now what? Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, yeah.
So it doesn't delay in terms of giving it to you. It might give it to you, but the point is, the whole point, what's initiating this is that you want to feel peaceful. You want to feel joy and satisfied because there's a sense of dissatisfaction. But this is how people, you hear extreme stories, right? Like so and so with all of their great wealth and power and fame, they ended up using substances and or killing themselves.
Yeah.
Why? Because there was no satisfaction, there was no meaning that could be extracted from any of those things. So Saturn here, that's what I'm saying. Its cruelty is in that sense. It's like I might actually give you what you want, but is that really what you want? Is that the purpose of your life? The dissatisfaction at the end, if one doesn't understand this concept that you're supposed to find the deeper meaning and essence, the dissatisfaction at the end is so much greater than the initial dissatisfaction that was created when it started to go retrograde. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just because a lot of people just think it has this negative connotation towards Saturn, but they
Mhm.
don't actually realize Saturn actually does a lot of good things.
Saturn's teaching us here. Saturn's trying to spiritualize our material oriented mind. Saturn's trying to cast our gaze on what's deeper than the surface and the superficial. So if we can learn this lesson through its Saturnine ways of doing things, we come out of the other end. Imagine like let's say I'm drinking a cup of coffee here, right? Imagine in my mind, I couldn't get satisfaction from this coffee unless if my cup was made of gold and full of diamonds. So this cup had to cost $2 million for me to just enjoy a sip of my coffee because my mind has constructed that. But imagine being having the ability to feel the joy of having this coffee in the ugliest paper cup and still have a sense of appreciation for it. So that's what I mean. Saturn's trying to make us understand the essence of things, which brings the greatest amount of joy, regardless of its appearance and how much of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So how could somebody watching this right now be like, I can apply this to me? It's currently transiting.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to look at what house it's transiting, what's all these things.
In answering your initial question in terms of what can a person do,
Yeah.
who am I to tell them what they can do? Like none of us will do what you're supposed to do because you can't, because you haven't had that realization yet. But what I can say, things to look out for, that's kind of leading you to that direction and becoming self-aware and conscious of the way our mind is carving this path is to understand that Saturn has certain significations like becoming pessimistic about things, becoming cynical about things, becoming a naysayer, just feeling dissatisfied and rejecting things all the time. You're being overcome by what Saturn signifies. What does that do? It makes you feel detached. It brings a sense of loneliness, a sense of perversion and abnormality to the person. And it just puts you in a disadvantage. You'll actually start to see it. It's creating lacks and gaps and dissatisfaction inside through all of these significations that Saturn has. I'll put the significations of Saturn here. And that dissatisfaction within the self is constantly looking for a solution. And if your solutions are, I need to become this person, I need to be this person, I need to have this stuff in order to get rid of these feelings, you can start to see that you're in that field of interaction and that compulsion is coming on. And the best that a person can do is to start self-reflecting on these things. And instead of putting all the energy and going and getting these things, to just quiet that dissatisfaction and frustration inside, is to understand what's actually happening. And I think that's the best we can do at any point until we have that realization within ourselves as to what is happening. Then we can tap into greater meanings and purpose and all of that. But in a video, I can't give a universal meaning and purpose and how to deal with this because people are at different places. Like even what I just said right now, just poof. For some people, it doesn't even resonate. It doesn't even connect to like just watch those feelings, sit with those feelings, sit with failure because Saturn represents failure, feeling like a failure. So now that you need to do something about it and be okay with that. That sounds ludicrous. So I don't know how to say what everyone should do. But the first step is to realize all these unfoldings that are related to Saturn in this nakshatra.
This might not be related, but I guess it could be. Saturn behaves differently for different people, though, right? Like for me personally, I think Saturn actually is a benefic planet in a weird way. Or is it basically wherever it's transiting, it depends on if it's sitting in the right place, how it acts, right?
I bet you anything if you looked at the entirety of your life, because you have lived
Or maybe
for
it's because just make
a
it my
minute or
karka.
two. No, because you have lived for a minute or two, and now you have a sense of maturity about all of the things that Saturn signifies: death, decay, illness, time, hardships, restrictions, limitations, boundaries. So now you have gained mastery over these topics and they've actually become part of your power. So Saturn, in that sense, is acting as a benefic. But someone who doesn't have life experience, as someone who's still 20 and hasn't experienced severe illness within themselves or another person, and the kind of restriction that that brings, that's a Saturnine thing that's happening, and it's very difficult. It's malefic on every sense of the word. But at some point, when we've lived long enough, and Saturn represents time and age, aging and old age, then we understand the function of these things and they become part of our own power. And then they start to feel like something beneficial in our life. But if we actually reflect to the beginning, these are some of the worst possible things that could happen to a human. And Saturn will never change its nature. Saturn will never be benign and kind and generous, even if it feels generous because it's giving. It took a lot before it gave something. It made you work hard. It took your life force. It took your time out of your life, age, years, decades before it gave something. So, yeah, Saturn's never going to act like Jupiter or Venus. But if we understand the energy of Saturn and we can negotiate with that aspect of life, we're powerful, super powerful. And it kind of makes you undefeatable in a sense. There's a resiliency that Saturn has, endurance, forbearance, that is very valuable in life. But I don't think Saturn will act in like a huggy kind of way or like Jupiterian, I bless you with goodness, even though.
But I guess Jupiter, like from everything I know, Jupiter can also expand the bad, right?
Yes.
So people always think of Saturn as so negative and Jupiter is so benefit, like, wonderful.
Yes.
But from my experience, or Jupiter can also expand your bad.
Saturn restricts, I don't know, maybe someone has a tumor. You definitely want a Saturn on that tumor for it not to augment and
Yeah,
expand.
like people who have Saturn in the seventh house, they say usually divorce won't happen, right? Like it protects the marriage.
Yes. But you know what, though? I just want us to, how do I put this? We like to sugarcoat things that are difficult and then things that could be described through sugarcoating. We want to make them difficult. I think to understand symbolism in general, to be able to interpret the world, it's really important that we call what something is what it is. Because even when you put Saturn in the seventh house, even when you exalt Saturn, let's say you have Libra in the seventh house, yes, it denotes stick it to itness in marriage and partnership dynamics, but that's for better and for worse. So
Yeah, so you would
you could end up with a very, let's say, a
abusive
husband or a
spouse.
wife that is not kind to you, but there's no way out. So is that a good interpretation of Saturn? I guess if the only thing that matters to you is to not get a divorce, yes. And I think in societies where that was the objective of till death do you apart, that's a great thing. But in today's society, in this context, it's like, well, is that a good thing that happens? So I don't know. But Saturn just creates, just stay. It's heavy footed, it's slow. So for some things in life, that's a good thing. You know, for someone who's like 85 years old, you don't want agility when your bones have become frail and your joints have kind of smoothed out, and because that kind of agility could actually cause injury. So Saturn slowing people down, yes, it sucks to slow down, but at the same time, it's preserving your longevity in some ways. So yeah, we can give good connotations to Saturn, but Saturn's also the one that is associated to the body deteriorating and becoming old. So we have to keep all of these things in mind about to really understand it fell again. I need a better stand. To understand the function of what Saturn does.
I know I was just thinking like Saturn gets a bad. No, that totally makes sense. I get it because
Yeah.
I know a chart like it's like there you could have your like exactly what you said, the seventh house, you think it's no divorce, and I know especially in Indian culture that's a wonderful thing,
Yes.
but like you said, it could also mean it's not the one most happiest marriage.
Yeah. But you're stuck, there's a stick to itness. It's very hard to disjoint that union when
Yeah,
Saturn's.
so I'm saying from a cultural standpoint that's
Yeah,
wonderful
that's a
because
great thing.
it's taboo to have divorce,
Yeah.
but from a like you just
Personal.
described it, yeah, or people with Saturn in the first house or whatever,
Yeah.
fourth house in the family, I'm guessing that would be applied.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody with this transit currently, like to kind of see how that applies to them, they'd be looking at their own chart and being like, what is this like, is transiting from this house
Yeah,
in,
you definitely look
yeah.
at the house. It's super important because it's telling you something about that sphere of life. So let's say you do have Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada, since we're on the topic of the seventh house. So relationship starts to feel super dissatisfying. You look at your partner, you're like, you're the problem. You're the reason why I'm not getting what I want. You're the reason why I haven't achieved or attained my goals. So you can start to see that dissatisfaction is getting super intensified. So the person starts coming up with the solution. What's the solution here? Leave the relationship, become detached, become kind of cold in the relationship, start looking at other things, other people. Do you see what I'm saying? How it's trying to work itself out? And let's say the person might leave. I don't know. You go chasing, and then when it's all said and done, you were supposed to understand the essence of something. You were supposed to understand the purpose and the meaning of relationships in general. It was never about this dissatisfaction that came on. If it's in the fourth house, it could be in regards to the family. If it's in the 10th house, it could be in regards to career matters. In the ninth house, maybe you're in university, getting your education, and you have declared your major, and then you're like, this feels very minor to me right now. I'm so dissatisfied. Third house could be about your siblings. So yeah. So yeah,
Is
that's
sibling is
at the
so
house.
this is I find some people say third house is younger siblings, 11th house is elder siblings.
Mhm.
Is it, or is it just siblings in general?
It's siblings in general,
The
but
third or the 11th?
11th is ninth from the third. So it places, you could give it the signification of the elder sibling.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wait, before, did
yeah,
we
go on.
get enough info about Saturn?
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think we can conclude Saturn's transit in Purva Bhadrapada. We can touch on it and then kind of look at some world events and maybe some personal events. I do know when as soon as Saturn entered Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra, my own world kind of turned upside down. So I'm kind of curious to see what's going to come of this and see how this is unfolding. And yeah, you guys leave us your comments, your experiences, see how it's unfolding in your lives. It'll be very interesting. Different case studies.
Do you have prominent placements there?
In Purva Bhadrapada,
Yeah.
not at all, but the people that I had to negotiate with and deal with, very prominent Purva Bhadrapada.
Oh, so, okay. So even if you yourself don't, it
Yes.
could be whoever you, okay.
Yes.
That's interesting because I don't have any placements there, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
It'd
so
be really good if people leave comments. Like I do have Purva Bhadrapada, or I don't. Or this person next to me has Purva Bhadrapada.
yeah, that'd be interesting to
Yeah.
see if how it affects people because
Yeah.
I never looked at it that way. I've always been like, if I don't have the placement,
Yes.
I've never thought about the person I'm like your partner or your child or your
Exactly.
parent or whoever, boss or whatever.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Because imagine
Yeah.
you have a family member with Purva Bhadrapada and they're being extremely affected by this. And then because of this, the dynamics begin to change. You're going to be affected by it too. So yeah, it's very good to pay attention to these things. And I'd love to hear from people's experiences just to learn and see how this unfolds itself.
Yeah, that'd be honestly really interesting. I didn't even thought
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah,
So basically, if you're married and or your partner, whoever,
exactly.
I guess their experience could be totally affecting you.
Yeah, imagine they're dissatisfied with you, so
Wow.
you're going to be affected.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Right? It's like, oh, I'm going to go look for greener pasture somewhere else. You're going to be like, no. So it's like, yeah, you're being affected. But it'll be really good to hear everyone's experience, whoever that can share. I'd love to learn. Yeah, I think that's good for Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada. So that brings us to the end of Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra and Saturn in it. And we'll come back with more nakshatras, whether if it's transit or just talking about nakshatra. Thank you for helping me so much today, Jay.
Yeah, good chat. I learned a lot today.
I enjoyed talking with you, and till next time, much love.
Bye.
Bye.